Hello YouTube, back on the channel for the AEW Full Gear Review 2022. Come in a day later here, had the time to absorb it and kind of think on it. And bottom line, there are certain elements of it that made a lot of sense, and obviously that worked out kind of the way that we would have expected it. When I alluded to in the last review for Dynamite this week was that I was really concerned the go-home show really quite didn't get there the way that I would have wanted it to. What's funny and kind of ironic is that the Full Gear pay-per-view actually delivered in a lot of ways that I kind of wish that the Dynamite episode itself lead into it, the go-home show, had done so leading into it. Because the truth is, as I go through the review, and I'm going to say it off at the very first one, but then I'm not going to repeat myself over and over again because otherwise it would become a bit of a broken record. But I'm going to say that they utilized video packages extremely effectively during the pay-per-view, and my thoughts during that whole bit were, why couldn't I see these video packages in the lead-in to the pay-per-view? Because a lot of times the video packages did a very good job establishing the relationship between the wrestlers that were going to fight, or, you know, the lead-in to the storyline, or filled in some of the gaps that were really completely devoid and completely missing in a lot of the shows leading into the pay-per-view itself. So it's like all of a sudden you basically rushed and were able to finally put together the pieces. Now, I'm pretty sure that they would have put some of that in 0 Hour. I didn't get a chance to watch that yet, so I'll get a chance to watch that a little later. But regardless, though, it doesn't matter. By that point, it's the 11th hour. You're really trying to just sell the pay-per-view. Even if you came up with all those video packages perfectly at that moment in time, I would love to have seen several of them in the weeks leading into, even before the go-home show, let alone on the go-home show, where it would have been absolutely beautiful to have some of those pieces that would have filled in some of the blanks. Now, that said, as a standalone pay-per-view, it was a very strong, a very good effort. Like top to bottom, I thought it was an excellent pay-per-view. Now, was it perfect? No. There are going to be some elements of it that I'm going to kind of critique as I go through this. But the reality of it is, even the pieces that weren't as great were still solid. They were okay. You know, there were certain things about it that maybe could have been a little bit better. But regardless, if you're talking a pay-per-view where the worst things on it was decent or okay or it could have been a little better, that's not bad. Because that means, for the most part, it's overall a pretty strong pay-per-view, top to bottom, and that is basically what we got with AEW Full Gear. So let me get into the review here. They started off with a steel cage match with Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy Jack Perry. So this is kind of the blow-off to their current feud because it looks like Christian is going to be injured for some time. So they'll have to kind of circle back around to that between Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, although it does leave Luchasaurus kind of in a weird spot with the result, but I'll get into it. It was smart to start with the steel cage match to get the big prop out of the way, and AEW has a gigantic steel cage, so it takes them some time to disassemble that. But regardless, when they lift up the steel cage, so they had basically the steel cage ready to go right at the beginning of the pay-per-view to get everybody started. You didn't have to do the big dramatic lowering thing. You started the pay-per-view with the steel cage in place. Jungle Boy bleeds early to start up and to set up the story of him kind of fighting from behind. It was very much a kind of street fighty kind of thing for first bit, a little bit there. Christian eventually steals the keys from one of the referees on the outside, which allows for the cage to be open and the fight to get to the outside. Now, Christian was being dragged away, but at the same time, the cage was opened, and then that allowed him to get to the outside of the ring to fight out there. Luchasaurus throws chairs and table into the ring. Jungle Boy, after back and forth, gets Luchasaurus onto a table, climbs to the top of the cage, and hits an elbow drop. Now, I skipped a ton of action in between because, as I said, I'm not going to go do the blow-by-blow, but it was an excellent steel cage match, a good blow-off for this feud, but at the same time, like, okay, so now what happens with Christian and Luchasaurus? I was kind of interested in the Christian leading Luchasaurus to try to win titles kind of thing. They alluded to it, and it's like, I actually kind of want to see that. So now it's kind of this weird spot where Luchasaurus comes off this loss. Jungle Boy can move on to other things, which is great for him, and eventually maybe circle around to the Christian thing when Christian is cleared again to wrestle. But in the meantime, it kind of leaves, we're going to have to find something for Luchasaurus to do. I'm hoping they don't just drop him because I like Dark Luchasaurus, and I'd like to see some more being done with him. But anyway, moving on from that. So the end result is that the match ended, jumps off the steel cage and hits an elbow drop and then wins with a submission. So that was how they ended the steel cage match. And then that leads us into a second match. So right off the top, we're going hot. We start off with a steel cage match and then move on to Death Triangle versus the Elite for the Trios Championship. So that was a big one. So we go from there, we go recapping the Elite returning, getting thoughts from Death Triangle. Again, that's why I first mentioned for me in my little notes here about the video packages, which was solid. Would have loved to have seen the video recap during Dynamite last week to build to this match. In particular, we got to see Death Triangle's reaction to it, and Pac and the Death Triangle got to talk some more, which I actually enjoyed, and they were kind of in a sit-down setting, which was actually really great. And I thought it added to it and gave it a nice video package feel with that to kind of lead into it. So Penta's going out there. Penta was going out without his vest, which I thought was kind of interesting, but they came out with their big entrance and everything. Great entrance for them. And then the Elite come out to Carry On My Wayward Son because Tony Khan likes spending money on music, licensing music. So there you go. Strong entrance. The crowd was into it, new gear and everything. So we'll see. The crowd was chanting F CM Punk, fuck CM Punk, which is very funny to me, but whatever. You know, the I guess it was a New Jersey crowd. So they were not going to be polite. But they told you what they liked and didn't like. So there you go. So the Lucha Brothers and Young Bucks trade connecting kicks, knock each other down. Now this was going to be the type of match where if you like your high spots and high flying, these are the guys, because you got 6 guys in there who can all go in that style, and you're going to get a bunch of elaborate spots. Now I'm going to talk in a little bit here about a couple of those things, but I'll get into a couple of notes on that. So like I said, they did these trade connecting kicks, knock each other down, and then kip up for a great sequence. This was a match of a lot of sequences. One of them, my next note here, is tons of great offense. But there was a sequence there where Nick Jackson is a good example of how they fall in love with sequences. So that was kind of a point I was going to make with this. So Nick jumps on the top rope, and he and Penta are basically about to do a thing where they're going to dive out. But what happens is they basically have to kind of set themselves, like really set themselves. The camera is looking right at them. And this is more of a production issue than anything else, really. Because the camera is looking right at them, and I'm watching them basically for 1 beat, 2 beat, 3 beat. They're getting set. And now Hurricane Rana onto the mass of people. So obviously they had to get themselves set, but the more elaborate the set piece is for this big fancy move, the longer you actually have to kind of sit there. And from a production standpoint, I hate that you basically are kind of all standing there going like, okay, we got to set this up. Guys, get ready. Can we do the Hurricane Rana now? Yes, now we can do it. Okay, great. Again, it's spectacular at the end result. But if you don't have quite as many elaborate set piece moves, then you don't have to spend so much time setting it up. So it's just something that I've always noticed with this kind of style of match that is always problematic. But again, an exciting match because there was tons of action in it. So the story with Pac offering Rey Fenix the hammer continued, which was fun. Multiple times he refused, but then finally Kenny Omega has him up in the one-winged angel after Pac had given him the hammer again. He was fighting off. But then he finally used the hammer, got the pin in the win. Now, quickly, I have a note about this. This leads to a consequence. So I'm actually okay with this result because it leads to a consequence here. But by the end, Pac is talking. So basically, Death Triangle retains. And then Phoenix looks unhappy that he had to resort to using the hammer. But then at the end, they show Pac talking to him and say, see, look what you did. You know, basically like, I'm proud of you, whatever. And he seems to be coming around to still being champion. So like you were giving this moral high ground, but then at the end you're kind of smiling like, oh, well, you know, we're still champions, so that's good. So I was just sitting there like, don't give in to evil so quickly. You literally just gave in to temptation once and then immediately, okay, now Rey Fenix is good with evil. Fine. Anyway, I just thought it was funny. Okay, so that was, like I said, excellent match. I would recommend it to you to check it out. Obviously, it's big high spot fest, so if you're into that kind of thing, this is a great match for that. And they're all very capable to do that kind of style and a great match. Now, the consequence of this is it's going to lead to a rematch since the Elite actually took the loss. It was Kenny Omega who took the pin. But since the Elite lost, you know, as a result of this, Tony Khan has, you know, ordered they're going to do a best of 7 series. So this actually counts as match number 1 of a best of 7 series. Well, thank God you're not doing a best of 7 in addition. But at the same time, best of 7? Ooh. It did lead to Tony Schiavone, though, making reference to an old best of 7 series. I don't remember who it was that he mentioned in it, but I did laugh because, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, wasn't there a best of 7 series in WCW with, I want to say, Booker T and Chris Benoit? Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it was Booker T and somebody, or maybe Chris Benoit and somebody, but there was definitely a best of 7 series that I remember from WCW that Tony Schiavone could have referenced. It would have been more recent than the one he actually ended up referencing, but I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, moving on from that perspective, great match. So next up was Nyla Rose taking on Jade for the TBS Championship, and I still appreciate that Nyla Rose has, in quotation marks, TBS Champion, for the self-declared, self-proclaimed TBS Champion. So Nyla Rose, Vicky Guerrero, and Marina Shafir come in on a lowrider. My next note is can't make this up. Nope, I can't make it up. That's basically what happened. I thought it was funny. I enjoyed it for what it was. Jade comes in with another cosplay, this time Thundercats. Had a stick or staff basically as part of the little cosplay thing, but it was literally falling apart. And then she does the thing where she snaps it in two. It's like literally it was falling apart in her hand, holding it above her head. So I was like, okay, guys, whatever. So anyway, fun. So I literally wrote next line. Entrance matchup, Nyla Rose wins. As far as entrances, I'll go with the low rider one. Much more effective, I think. But anyway, so Jade gets a ton of early offense. Now, I did kind of note here, I get the idea, but it's odd given that Nyla technically has the weight advantage and likely matches or exceeds power. So the whole idea is that Nyla Rose can either match or exceed Jade's power. And at the same time, Jade got a ton of early offense. So I was like, okay, fine. Then the match slows down, super slows down. Jade tried a terrible looking jump off the top rope into nothing, gets a few boos for that. With the previous 2 matches, this was a dead zone for the crowd. So let me just say this way. So at this point, you got a slow, methodical match. You've got Jade's inexperience. You've got a crowd that just came off 2 super hot matches. This was going to be a dead zone for anybody, but you put in one of the least experienced people. Nyla Rose is good and can work with a lot of folks, but at the same time, this was not the best spot for this match. I understood that why they put it here because there are other matches that probably would have suffered as well in this zone. I guess this is a sacrifice we can make, but this match was not great. It wasn't terrible, but it was too slow. Now, my suggestion, let me get to the conclusion here, and then I'll give a quick a suggestion that I would have made for this one. So it was a dead zone, like I mentioned. It only slowed down even more, and by that point, the crowd's dead on it. So Nyla misses a swanton, Jade hits a pump kick, and then Jaded, and then wins. I just wrote a clunker. It was very much a clunker. My suggestion with something like this, and this is something that Tony Khan and the folks there have to really pay attention to, is that Jade is still green in the ring. At the end of the day, she's improving all the time. Her character work and her presentation is on point. But in ring, it's not good. The fact, that you're doing this win streak thing, like, I think you hamstrung yourself. So she's like 42-0, and you're like, oh, well, who's going to beat the streak? It's like, at this point, it doesn't matter. You got to get somebody to beat her just to win the damn title to create some friction. Because the Nyla Rose thing was the closest thing she's had to any kind of actual feud. It was based on kind of a silly premise, but at least it was entertaining. But the problem is, when we get to the match like this, it wasn't good. And I can't blame them given what the slot they were in, but I can blame them given the quality of the match, because they were not capable of winning over this crowd. And if you're going to do this kind of match in a pay-per-view setting, and it was a good crowd and everything for the most part, and if you're going to do this in a pay-per-view setting, though, my suggestion would have been to at least understand the limitations of the people that you got in the ring. I would honestly have taken a page from Macho Man and Ricky Steamboat in WrestleMania 3. Not in the sense of quality of match, because you're not matching that. You're not going to come within 100 miles of that. Honestly, if you'd been 2% of that, I would have been thrilled. But where I would have stolen a page is I would have stolen a page from the idea that I would definitely have coordinated and carefully choreographed this match. Given Jade's experience, she and Nyla Rose should have been there working on this match, coordinating and choreographing a lot of the sequences so that you can go from sequence to sequence to sequence smoothly. Now, while that would not win over the crowd, it would have made it a lot less clunky. It would have made it a lot less slow, because if everybody knows what they're doing and everybody's well coordinated and have rehearsed it carefully, you could have still gotten a serviceable match out of this and probably won over the crowd a little bit, because it would have been a little smoother and a little bit tighter as far as the match is concerned. It could only have helped. Honestly, at this moment, as long as you want Jade to keep running with this, if you got a high-profile match like this on a pay-per-view, I want it choreographed very carefully. I want the sequences choreographed. I want the back and forth choreographed. I want you to carefully and meticulously put the match together and then make sure Jade's able to execute the game plan, and just do that. Do that until such time that Jade is more capable of doing audibles and really working in the ring. Until then, you choreograph the whole damn thing from top to bottom. That would be my opinion. That's what I would do. Following that is now a great match again. So now we've got Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, Claudio Castagnoli, and Sammy Guevara for the ROH Championship in a four-way match. So they minimized the ROH content on here, which was good, but this was a great match here. So great sequences throughout. Double crab from Bryan Danielson, and Claudio gets broken up by a Guevara double cutter. So that was a cool move. Tons of great action culminating Sammy turning on Jericho. So many reversals. A leaping Judas effect followed by a regular Judas effect on Claudio is what actually allows Jericho to retain, but there were tons of sequences. Everybody got in offense. It was a great match, great four-way. Again, this would be another one that I could certainly recommend to you to go back and watch, because from an in-ring standpoint, you got four guys who really know what they're doing. Sammy Guevara is the young guy in there, but he's got obviously amazing moveset, tons of athleticism, and between the four of them, they were able to put together a very fun match. And the crowd kind of got back into it after that, because these guys are great and they know what they're doing. So next after that is Saraya taking on Britt Baker. So we actually got 3 women's matches on the main card. So that was good. I think that was excellent. Again, Jade and Nyla is easily the weakest of the 3 for the reasons that I already outlined. Now, Saraya and Britt Baker is actually pretty close to as weak from the in-ring perspective, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'll get into it. So Saraya and Britt Baker come out, but at least they have their story and their thing and their feud leading into it, and they do another video package again that would have been nice to have in the weeks before, because it actually did a good job establishing everything, although the video package plays up to the comeback story part of it and ignores the promo from this very week in the go-home show, where Britt Baker basically cut a babyface promo, and it's a weird mixed message. So am I supposed to be cheering Saraya for the comeback story, or am I supposed to be cheering Britt Baker for kind of being the representative of AEW, being one of the AEW originals, or how are we supposed to play this? And it was a weird mixed message. So Britt Baker comes out without her entourage, plays a more straightforward role, again, kind of leading to a bit of a mixed message on this. And to be clear, they never interfere. It's a straight match between the two of them, which again is like, okay, so what story are we trying to tell here? I'm a little confused about it. So they basically start off wrestling pretty conventionally, and then there's a moment where Surya kind of is slowly getting up, and it looks like there's a throwdown there, and she's slowly getting up. The referee's looking at her, Britt Baker's looking at her, and then she was just playing possum, and then Britt Baker kind of smiles at her, and they smile at each other, and then they get back to the action. But then they continue to be more, Britt Baker returns to being more heelish with Surya's brother ringside, goes into the character work that Britt Baker's very good at, so that worked out great. Now, from here it gets, like I said, there are different clunky steps. It was methodically paced, I'm going to say. It was extremely safe because, and the note here that I make is that Britt Baker hit plenty of moves on the neck of Saraya, but everything has been very careful and sound. Like, even multiple stomps throughout are kind of like she's putting the stomp like on her shoulder blades. So like, just from a practical standpoint, everything is like being extremely careful not to actually hit the neck more than like the bare minimum. Everything is like it looks around it, but it's like very safely executed, everything. So it's one of those things where, but it also makes the match a little bit more methodical. It makes it a little bit more slow. It makes it feel like everything is like we're hesitating. And the crowd, I think, is kind of watching it and going like, I don't know, is anything going to happen? So I think that took a little bit of the crowd out of it. And just like, so now we're having this match where like they're kind of moving around. It's like this slow dance happening. It was decent for what it was. Like I said, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but the methodical nature of it meant that we were never going to get any real momentum going, because it's like you may as well have wrapped Saraya in bubble wrap for this match, because we needed to be super careful. Like, the worst thing that could have happened was some kind of injury on the first match back. Even with all the clearances and everything, everybody was kind of concerned about it. So, and it came across in the way that this match was structured. But regardless, Britt was being more heelish with Saraya's brother at ringside, so the family's there, which, you know, is a bit of a telegraph. But anyway, moving on. So Saraya brought out some of her original WWE finisher. I can't remember what it was called. Wasn't it like the page turner or something? It was basically like this sweep of the leg that flipped them around. But now they called it the nightcap. So they made a lot of allusions to night. So as part of the naming conventions of the big moves. So Baker hit plenty of moves in the neck, like I mentioned, very careful and sound. Crowd was iffy. I did mention here that and Surya hit the former Rampage move, the DDT, and I couldn't figure out if that was the name of it, but it sounded like they were calling it the Good Night. Again, another play off the night, another night pun. But then Saraya hits a knee strike and 2 DDTs to win. So Saraya wins clean in her comeback match after 5 years. The selling point here is the comeback story. People being nervous of the results, Saraya and general cautiousness during the match made it okay at best. Nothing really to come out of it. Baker did a good job with what was given, but that one fell flat for me. That was kind of my point on this. And the end result was like, it's fine. But at the same time, it's like, okay, so other than the possibility of what's to come, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, Britt Baker's kind of in this weird spot. And I understood that like in a comeback match, Saraya winning makes a lot of sense. But I like the concept that some people threw out of Saraya maybe winning but cheating to win, which would have at least made it interesting. It would have given you a possibility of a rematch and maybe extended a little bit more time down the road to come back and do some of the other stuff that you could do. But right now, like Saraya, okay, you won your first match. Okay, so who's your next opponent going to be? I don't need to rush her out there and have a bunch of matches. And in the post scrum, they talked about, taking it easy and working their way into it. But like now she's going to be in a little bit of a holding pattern. She came out, they were able to lead into the one match. Great. But now what? Now what do you do? So that's kind of where I'm like, okay, but now what do you do? So anyway, we'll have to see. Regardless, moving on. The next match was Wardlow and Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs for the TNT Championship, a.k.a. Hoss Fight. We do love ourselves a Hoss Fight. Wardlow's athleticism is great, but a guy his size should not be trying swantons. So that was a point that I made early on here. He nearly fell. He actually was almost tripping on the ropes, but he managed to hit it, which is great. But again, a guy his size, I understand he's super athletic. I don't need him hitting swantons. Like, not necessary from him. All 3 guys are taking turns, hitting each other. Wardlow is hitting Hobbs with a powerbomb. It is a 3-way match, so kind of the closing sequence is Wardlow is hitting Hobbs with powerbombs, seemingly in a sequence about to end the match. But it is a 3-way. So Samoa Joe hits him with the TNT Championship, which he can do, and then submits an already unconscious Hobbs for the win and is now a double champion. So now he's the TNT Champion and the ROH Television Champion, which sets up a potential, feud with those 2 guys, Samoa Joe and Wardlow, which should be a lot of fun. So smart move by Joe, and Wardlow looked pretty dumb. He looked pretty dumb just worrying about multiple power bombs when he's in a 3-way match. Somebody else can interfere. You got 3 guys in that match. So, that was the conclusion of Hobbs Fight, and I guess we'll get Wardlow and Joe going forward. And I don't know what's going to happen with Hobbs, because clearly Hobbs, certainly I like him being in the mix, but I don't know what's going to happen with those guys as far as that's concerned. So next up here, I've got a promo with Chris Jericho and Jake Hager. So it's really the first promo of the night. So after all these matches, that's pretty good. We didn't overdo it on the promos. So they're doing their promo, and then Orange Cassidy interrupts and then sets up a challenge with Ishii versus Jericho, obviously a former ROH champion, but then ends up challenging Hager. So they basically agree to that. And then Hager's still there with Orange Cassidy. And this is a little bit of comedy, but at the same time sets up a match. And they're talking about it, and he's talking about what's in the backpack. He pulls out the All Atlantic Championship, and he's like, "You want it?" And he goes, "You like it?" And he goes, "I like it like I like my hat." And I just enjoyed that from Jake Hager. I got a kick out of it. So then basically Orange Cassidy says, challenges Jake Hager to the All Atlantic Championship match. And my next line is, this was stupid, but I was amused. And really, it was stupid, but I was entertained, so it's fine. Next up in the matches is Sting and Darby Allin versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. Truthfully, I don't care. It's fine. It was okay. But, like, I don't care about seeing Jeff Jarrett. Like, I really don't. And as a storyline, like, guys, this is not TNA. This is not, WCW 1999, but whatever. My next note is Jarrett is in great shape. I kind of want to get this over with. So that's kind of the sentiment that I have with this. Sting and Darby Allin used a body bag as a distraction at the beginning, so Darby Allin could attack Lethal and Sting could get to Jarrett in the ring. The crowd was literally chanting TNA, which did not shock me, all things considered. Plenty of interference here. Darby tried a coffin drop. Jarrett hit him in the back with a guitar. So there were some moments in this match. Hit a scorpion death drop, coffin drop combo, and that's what ended up winning the match. So Darby Allin wins with the coffin drop, and Sting and Darby Allin continue to have some wins as far as being a tag team, and it was fine for what it was. It was a match that you probably could have dropped off this. You could have put it in the pre-show and it would have been fine. Anyway, so now we get into Jamie Hayter taking on Toni Storm for the AEW Interim Women's Championship. Please drop the Interim title already. I know they mentioned again in the scrum, but for the love of all that is holy, drop the Interim. Moving on. Once again, the video recap was better than the build. And that's a shame because I was looking forward to this match, and honestly, I think it delivered in a lot of ways, and I think the match itself was great. So Jamie Hayter had new gear, and Toni Storm was with the regular entrance in gear, which kind of telegraphs things. Not always, but oftentimes it does. Crowd was super heavily on the side of Jamie Hayter. This was easily the best paced and structured of all the women's matches. A strong, solid match from top to bottom. They were both doing a great job. They are familiar with each other, so I think that made a lot of sense. But they executed an excellent game plan as far as this match is concerned. This right here is what I would like to see more of, because clearly they had a plan. Clearly they had a structure, and they were both able to execute it. And I thought that was really good. So we got interference from Rebel. She got ejected. That interference didn't work. We got interference from Britt Baker because at one point Toni Storm got knocked to the outside. The belt was there, and then all of a sudden, out of the side shot of the camera angle, she gets hit with a stomp onto the belt, and it's Britt Baker. And she's there, and with Rebel as well, they both had Jamie Hayter shirts on. So, Team Baker, Hayter, whatever, was still, intact, at least for the moment. So she interfered on her behalf. It didn't quite work, but Jamie Hayter then kicks out of the Storm Zero. So a lot of near falls in this one. Britt Baker yelled at Storm from the apron, got knocked off. Baker's trying to take the cover off the turnbuckle, so this is a closing sequence. Baker's trying to take the cover off the turnbuckle to help out, and as she's doing that, Storm throws Hayter into Baker, knocking Britt Baker off, but as she does so, it removes the turnbuckle, so now it's exposed. But then Storm went into the exposed turnbuckle after that, and then she's hit by the Haterade lariat. I guess it's called the Haterade now, but that is the closing sequence. So now Jamie Hayter is your new AEW Women's Interim Champion. Please drop the Interim title. It's stupid. It was a great call, popular with the crowd, great reaction for it, new champion. But again, because of the Interim title, it's like, okay, so do we count these title reigns? Because Toni Storm had about as good a run with the AEW Women's Championship as you could have, considering the fact that you never acknowledged it as a championship. So then Jamie Hayter has now won this thing. And again, in the post-match scrum, Tony Khan is kind of acknowledging that, yeah, we may have to do something at some point to acknowledge somebody as the lineal champion. Yes, I think you need to do that. I think you should have done that already while Toni Storm still held the belt. As far as I'm concerned, both those title reigns should count, and that would be best for everybody involved. When Thunder Rosa is ready to come back, she's ready to come back, and she can be right there at the beginning and compete for it again. Regardless, we'll move on here. Swerve in Our Glory versus The Acclaim for the AEW Tag Team Championship. I'm not going to say it again with the video packages. You understand what I said. Extended rap entrance from The Acclaimed. More teased dissension between Swerve and Keith Lee, which plays into the story of the match. Swerve is about to attack with these bolt cutters, I guess. It was similar to what he did when he attacked Billy Gunn in that little mini movie they did. Billy Gunn comes out trying to attack him, gets held up by security. Swerve tries to hand the cutters to Keith Lee to cheat. And I made a quick note here. Maybe he should have asked Pac to do it. But seriously, don't copy and paste this gimmick. We're trying to get somebody to cheat with a weapon. Anyway, so Keith Lee throws it away, and then Swerve slaps him. And that is the end of Swerve in Our Glory because Keith Lee walks out on Swerve. The Acclaim retain 2-on-1. And now the focus moves on to what happens between Swerve and Keith Lee going forward, and the Acclaim move on, hopefully, to another tag team title feud. I'd love to see FTR in there. There's some other possibilities, but we'll definitely have to move on to another feud for those guys. So next up, we got our main event of the evening. MJF taking on Jon Moxley for the AEW Championship. It's pretty much, the crowd is into MJF here. They're looking for a new championship, and MJF's kind of playing that middle ground there with a lot of it, really soaking in and milking the reaction of the crowd. Moxley's happy to play the heel for the crowd. He has no problem with that. So he immediately switched right into that mode. No problem. So we ended up having a lot of back and forth, a lot of physicality, 2 referee bumps, not 1, but 2. Regal comes down to the ring and gets MJF not to use the ring by extolling him, trying to get him to. But then eventually gives him the brass knuckles while the referee has his back turned so that MJF can use the brass knuckles and win. Evil Regal joins evil MJF, and now he has aligned himself with the devil. But we have our new champion, and that is the end sequence that ends the show. Strong showing. The crowd was into it. Obviously, they were ready for a new champion. Moxley has done a tremendous job. And if anything, he has deserved vacation. Like, he really does deserve that vacation that he should have been able to take in the first place. But he has earned it because, frankly, he helped carry that title and kept it strong, kept it in a good position. And now MJF can run against whoever his next opponent is going to be. Probably the one that's coming out of the title tournament here. So I think that based on the way the bracket is coming out, it wouldn't shock me if Ricky Starks is the first opponent for MJF coming out of that. And I'm sure those two could have a pretty fun back and forth, and MJF will retain, but regardless, that'll allow him to get off his reign to an interesting kind of a fun start, and we'll have to see what goes from there. The next step is going to be the key. So overall, like I said, top to bottom, I was super pleased and super happy with this pay-per-view. I thought it was well executed in a lot of it. I wish the lead into it had been nearly as well executed, but the show itself got the job done. The show itself deserves a lot of the praise that I think it will get for a lot of the things that were done. Tony Khan listened to the crowd, gave him the Jamie Hayter title reign that we want to see. But at the same time, like I said, we got to drop that interim title. It's still my opinion because it devalues it a little bit. I would like to consider it the championship, just adjust the lineal championship accordingly. And then, like I said, we'll roll into it. When Thunder Rosa's ready to come back, Thunder Rosa's ready to come back, and you'll have a built-in opponent for whoever has the championship at that time. And I think that'll be for the best for everybody. Otherwise, MJF going in now leads into a new story with that. As always with AEW, it's not just the execution of the moment. In the moment, this execution was excellent. Now the question is going to be, what's the follow-up? What is next for the Acclaimed? What is next for MJF? What is next for Jamie Hayter? What is next for Britt Baker? What is next for Saraya? There's a lot of what is next. What is next for Jungle Boy? What is next for Luchasaurus? What is next for a bunch of other people that are sitting? What is next for Miro, who's not even around right now? And he is available. And there's a lot of possibilities where I could see him being in a lot of different places. And for love of all that is holy, someone get the goddamn TBS Championship off of Jade unless you have a more concrete plan. Because right now, I have no issue with her having this title, but it has run its course. Right now, it doesn't feel like there's anything to it. Nyla Rose had the only thing resembling a feud and was able to make it work as well as it could be, but it was clunky in and of its effort. And this end result is like, okay, she's 42-0. So what? At this point, so what? Who would be her next opponent? You're just going to feed her some more jobbers to get her to 50? That's a vanity metric at that point. If you're going to do it, you need to have a distinct and defined plan. And while I enjoy Jade's work, there are folks that I've seen out there that have decided, she should just, combine the championship. Absolutely not. As much of a struggle as it has been with the TBS Championship to get something that makes sense for her, I don't think giving her another championship is going to make any more sense than that. Figure out what's going on with the TBS Championship and her first, and then we can talk about that. But it's another one of what is next for insert name here. So that's kind of the overall. I'm super happy with this pay-per-view. As a standalone, looking at it in a vacuum, I thought it was great. Now, my question is going to be how do we follow it up on Dynamite? There's going to be some good matches there, and we're going to get a best of 7 series. If you love your trios, we're going to get a best of 7. Oh, my goodness, that's going to be quite a ride for quite a while. It's going to keep me busy. I would not be shocked if we go to 7 on this one. I feel like that's the way AEW is going to want to book this, so you're going to have a lot of trios matches coming up. I would like to see some of the other trios team also get a crack at this at some point, but I guess we're going to roll with these guys for a while. The matches will be fun. I have no doubt that it'll be enjoyable. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on AEW Full Gear. An excellent show. It was worth every penny. I was happy to pay it, and I was happy to enjoy the show. Otherwise, we'll see kind of where the road goes into the new year, and they're going to have that London show in 2023. We'll see what happens with that. I'd be curious if they would be able to somehow get Jamie Hayter to still be champion leading into London. That would be very interesting. The reaction she would probably get from that crowd. That'd be crazy. And Surya comes out in London as well. Ooh. There's at least that British connection with those names that I think would do well. I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens with that. Anyway, curious about your thoughts. Feel free to throw them in the comments section. Otherwise, more videos coming up on the channel. I'll be back for the AEW Dynamite review coming up midweek. If you like the video, subscribe. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.